will just do a quick reminder of, I know we haven't set our board standards for meetings in stone yet. We haven't voted on that yet, but just a reminder, when we have presentations, we are going to invite commentary during it or questions to keep a clean video for the public to be able to see and access very quickly in our meetings. There will be time for board response after this. Public response will only happen during public comment time.
Okay, so thank you for giving us the opportunity to do a presentation. We're presenting on some climate and culture updates for the middle high school as we kind of get into looking at some multi-tiered systems of support work and of course budget season and things like that. We always like to share where we're at and what our priorities are going forward. So I wanted to start just with, some updates on where the school is being kind of viewed externally. We don't seek out these sorts of ratings, but they are things that are important to note because these are not things that we're generating on our own. These are things that are generated by third parties that collect and aggregate data about public schools and then put out ratings. So I wanted to note that we have our highest rating by the U.S. News and World Report that we've had in several years. The only regional school that ranked higher than us by, I believe, one spot was Conval, and then our high school was next in line behind them. And as it notes, we're the #1 high school in this region of the state at this point in the Keene metro area. And then Great Schools Ratings, which compiles aggregate data and provides ratings for primarily real estate purposes, has rated our high school at a 9 out of 10 on their scale, noting that we are above average compared to other schools in New Hampshire with the same grade spans, and that is above all the other schools in the region. So again, these organizations compile graduation rates, post-secondary attainment, numbers of learners who take AP or college courses while in high school and pass exams related to those courses. Of course, they weigh in the standardized testing data, things like that. And I will, every chance I get this year, remind folks that the state has awarded our high school the School of Excellence designation for last year. Again, that was quite a grueling process that schools go through for that recognition. If you look through the list, there are several years with no secondary school winner in that category because nobody who put their name into the hat was deemed to be acceptable by the criteria this organization sets. The note on the right is from the organization through the state that does this. They noted that we have a flexible, challenging culture centered around student growth, an innovative proficiency-based model that empowers students to demonstrate masteries in ways that align with their strengths and goals, and on and on. So again, our school, despite, I think, a continued challenging environment, I know there were some comments perhaps made in a recent public forum implying that less than half of our kids can read when they graduate. Absurd. We continue to have high designations for how our school performs, and despite one single test being the SAT, or in the middle school, the SAS, our kids at the aggregate of all of their data continue to impress us and do wonderful things, and our school continues to grow. So looking at school culture, there's different angles to look at this. One set of data that I typically present relates to behavioral types of data. This is a compilation of discipline data. This is noting the total number of office referral incidents that were submitted by staff in any given year. So you can see the first year was 2021 to 2022. There were 1,316 behavioral incidents that rose to the office referral level. You can see a quick decline in the 22 to 23 school year, a little bit of an uptick the following year, and then an overall decline for last year. Another piece that we look at is suspensions. Suspensions in or out of school can give some indication of the severity of the types of behaviors that we're seeing. Typically, we would only use out of school suspension for something that is a significant safety issue, a drug type of issue, or repetitive behaviors where other interventions are not working. So out of school suspension is obviously the most significant intervention that we would use, in school suspension being the one just before that. And you can see here that the worst year for both suspensions was the 23 to 24 school year. We saw a significant increase, as you'll see when we look at some of the specific categories of behavior. That year we saw a large uptick primarily in bullying. You'll see that noted when we look at the report for major incidents, as well as some other categories that year, like some physical challenges that we had with unsafe behaviors and an uptick in some drug use and things like that. Drugs in our school means vaping, for lack of a better term, occasionally some marijuana and things like that. but we had an uptick that school year that we hadn't seen in previous years. So we spent a lot of last year focusing on bullying prevention, increasing awareness of how to spot and respond to bullying, as well as some drug intervention. So you'll see that in the data. And you can see that last year, the number of out-of-school suspension incidents, that's the number of behavioral times that we felt out-of-school suspension was necessary, dropped to 77 from the previous year's 178. And in-school suspension incidents dropped from 330 in the 23 to 24 school year down to 202 instances last year. And another good indicator to look at is the numbers of days where these types of interventions are used. Again, you can see that same spike in the 23 to 24 school year where we had, out of school suspension is the orange bar. You can see that even though there were less uses of out of school suspension that year, more days, which is a good indication that the incidents that earned that as the intervention required longer lengths of time perhaps than other incidents. And then again, a significant down spike in both in-school and out-of-school suspension days noted last year, reducing the out-of-school suspension by 200 days just about, and in-school suspension by about 120 days. So there's significant growth even noted last year based on some of the work that we had done and reflecting on this data from the 23-24 school year, which was a very tough year. This looks at major categories of behaviors that we noted, and the green bar is the 23 to 24 school year on each one of these. So again, if you kind of look across at some of those categories, that category of physical aggression, which is anything from shoving or things like that. We don't have, knock on wood, generally fights in our school. I can't remember the last time that we actually had a fight, but that could be, again, pushing, shoving, things like that. You can see a little spike in the unsafe behavior category, a large spike in the substantiated bullying. Substantiated, it means that there was an investigation done with evidence indicating that the reported behaviors occurred. That increased to 46 substantiated instances in the 23-24 school year, where you can see the previous 2 years were 6 and 5 respectively. So that was a huge jump, which required an entirely different focus on that coming into last school year, which did then result in a large downtick that we hope to and expect to see continuing. And you can also see under the vaping substances category, again, we had an uptick in the 23 to 24 school year and a slight downtick last year as we spent more focus on providing resources. We made a partnership with Youth Services in Keene to provide some smoking cessation and anti-use types of programming for learners. And we've had really good success with helping prevent repeat behaviors in that category for some individuals. We've seen a continued decline in some of the classroom disruptive types of categories like disrespect. That captures, obviously, learners being disrespectful with their language towards teachers or peers in the classroom or school. Continued downtick in that category. Disruption has seen significant drops, especially last year. That category dropped by almost half as we, again, continued to focus on some school-wide initiatives. Defiance had a really bad year in the 21-22 school year, which was that first kind of full post-COVID year. All of those categories had, close to their highest in that year, but a pretty steep drop in the subsequent years. So in these categories of significant behaviors, we've continued to see growth as we've invested time and energy in partnerships and programming to support kids. Last year, we also, again, because of that significant spike that we had seen in some of the behaviors, particularly at the middle school, a lot of those categories are actually heavier at the middle level than they are at the high school level. So we created a counter program called the Perch, which was a regulated classroom type of space to provide anchoring and behavior intervention. It aligns nicely with what the 2 elementary schools have for their regulated classroom or restorative classroom types of spaces. And we have a program already at the high school called Access that provided some of that service. We had a big gap at the middle school, so we reallocated positions to create this program. This was not any new positions that were added. And this became a space where learners could go for a short break. Some learners have regular check-ins here. You can see this is the aggregate visit log. So you can see where in the green bar the total visits spike. So that gives us some data and some time to kind of focus, knowing that we go into some parts of the year where more visits are happening. And we also can see the number of minutes per visit and the number of visits per day, which is helpful for comparing month to month. So again, we kind of get some good data from this, but it also explains how we were able to turn some of those really significant behaviors back into being more under control. And we have data supporting that some learners who had gotten to the level of that suspension category through access to this type of program were able to make better behavioral choices or get more anchoring support so that they were able to remain in the classroom without being disruptive or unsafe. So again, this program has a big impact. that plays out in our data, and it's something that we're continuing to grow this year as we look at the next steps for implementation of that. And then this is another, so behavior is one category to look at. We also like to look at how our kids are doing as they progress through our school and how they leave us, essentially. And our hope is that we always have as close to 100% in the blue bar, which is the graduation rate and the 4-year graduation rate time span, as close to 100% as possible there. And the green line is the percentage of our learners who are leaving here and attending college within a year of leaving Conant High School. So this data, we were able to go as far back as the 2017-18 school year. That year was 84.5% of kids graduated and about 48% of kids attending college. So that would be firmly pre-COVID. Then you can see getting into that COVID year, we had about 90% of our kids graduate and about half of them moved on to college. And then we've invested a significant focus as a school culture, both in supporting pathways and support services so kids can meet our graduation expectations and meet the high expectations that go with that, but a consistent increase in post-secondary attainment for learners as well, with this past graduating class being at 65% of them attending college immediately after they've left here or attending a trade school. So that's the best results both for graduation rates that we've had in at least the last decade, as well as post-secondary attainment as we've developed programs and kids have continued to feel confident in pursuing that as each year goes on. We have consistently now for the past at least 4 years had about half of our senior class participating in New Hampshire Applies Day, which is something that happens statewide, where kids can apply to any school in New Hampshire. We have college reps come in, they help them write their essays, they apply on the spot. All the application fees are waived. So we've consistently had at least half of our seniors doing that each year for the last several years. I remember back in the 17-18 school year, that would be maybe a third or a quarter of kids who would do that. So we've got a lot of anecdotal pieces like that support why this increase is happening. But again, it comes back to having a specific focus, getting more of our learners to graduate and providing resources they can either go to trade school, 2-year school, or 4-year school. And more of our kids are finding that path to success, which is great. Yep, next, please. This is the list of colleges and trade schools that our learners have attended from the past 3 graduating classes. So obviously I deleted duplicates. There's 68 institutions on this list here. They range, quite a range. We've got some private schools like Champlain College, which is a private liberal arts school with a variety of majors. We've got some state universities, some more well-known than others. New Hampshire schools, there's several technical institutes on here. Keene Beauty Academy has been a popular choice as more learners have gotten access to the cosmetology program through Keene. We usually take it whatever seats they'll give us in that program. We've got RPI, we've got RTI, WPI. So our kids generally, when they seek to go to a school, we're able to support them going there and they have what they need to find success in doing that. Lots of programming and supports that we've been implementing to support school culture and climate. We have twice a week mentoring, and you can just click through this animation because we're going to get into more detail in each one of these. Student leadership programs continue to grow. We've got excellent people who are stepping into leadership roles and helping to grow and develop them. Classroom guidance has been a focus through our school counseling team as that team has continued to grow its collective skill. And we've been continuing to hire really great people in those roles. And under the amazing leadership of Kim Baker, who's going to present as well tonight, we've seen lots of growth in that area. We started 6 years ago, the Foundations for the Future program as part of a full career future planning program, which was ahead of its time because the new Ed 306s require comprehensive career and future planning, which we already have. That's great. And last year was the first year that loop completed with a senior capstone, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And this year, we've really been focusing as well on further defining our multi-tiered systems of support, which includes a learner support and student support team model. So just some examples of student leadership that we've built, Heather Lindstedt being implemented, essential to many of these programs. We've got tons of teachers and learners with great ideas as well. We continue to grow our transition leadership program, Web at the middle school and Link at the high school. Huge numbers of kids in each one of those programs that help to make the transition. In the case of Web, those are 8th graders who help incoming 6th graders. And it's not just that they run the orientation at the beginning of the year, which they do, but they continue to offer programming throughout the course of the year. They come to lunches with them. They go to mentoring programs with them. They run events. And the same thing with Link, which is 11th and 12th graders supporting new freshmen. Our National Honor Society this year is extending to grade 10 as well. We last year had about 50 learners in grades 11 and 12 who met the academic, which is a 3.2 grade point average academic requirement, as well as the service and leadership pieces. And this year, with adding the sophomores, that will grow further. We also introduced last year a National Junior Honor Society, which is grades 7, 8, and 9. That's why we start grade 10 with National Honor Society. And they had great success last year. I think they had 25 members for their first year. So at the middle and high school, we have that academic leadership piece. This year, we're also adding a National Art Honors Society, which is just at the beginning stages of organizing. Our student councils at both schools are continuing to mature, which has been really great. They come to me with ideas that I don't often know how to handle. We've got youth mental health and NAMI, which I'll ask Kim to talk about.
So we had the opportunity to take 9 high school learners to Concord. We were invited by NAMI New Hampshire to participate in a youth leadership program that supports suicide prevention, and it's a train the trainer program. So those 9 learners will come back into our building and train other leaders to continue the message of suicide prevention, ways to support learners or adults that they know, even in the community in need, the resources that are available. Also knowing that they're not alone in that process and that we're here to support them. And it was quite an amazing day. There were 4 other schools there, and just seeing our learners interact with other schools and to engage at that level. And then they came back and we had a meeting here just to debrief, and they're really excited about pushing into mentoring groups, putting some messaging around our building, reaching out to families, just to engage more in that conversation. It was really something amazing.
Our Interact Club continues to be a great partnership with the Rotary, quite robust. I think they're typically between 40 and 50 members every single year, providing service in the community, doing a service trip, supporting the school, and helping to make connections between all different kind of parts of our community here. And I think, I don't know why National Honor Society is on there twice, but there it is again. I think that was supposed to be National Art Honor Society, which is the new one. And Dante had mentioned earlier his creation of the forum and bringing on board. They're actually going, I think, in November to the Granite State Challenge to do the qualifying rounds, which is really exciting. But we continue to have examples like that at both the middle school and the high school of kids creating or asking for opportunities to develop school culture, which is why I think what Dante said is absolutely what I'm seeing as well. Every year we've seen this where more kids become more invested in things. The spirit days every year get a little bit more spirited. The pep rally was incredibly loud for both the middle school and the high school. I did have the pleasure of seeing a chunk of the middle school homecoming and most of the high school one, and being at the dance for the high school homecoming. Really cool to see that many kids. The homecoming dance at the high school was great. You had kids grabbing each other and like seniors really pulling in the freshmen to try to get them excited about dancing. We're seeing more and more of that as kids want and expect to have those opportunities to develop their school culture. So it's been really fun to see that growing. It does put a strain on our ability to manage all the different events between the 2 schools, but that's a good problem to have.
So I just want to talk a little bit about classroom guidance. So we spent a lot of time in the classroom. So at the middle school counselor, Ashley Hannaford, is in 6th grade every week and in 7th and 8th grade every other week doing classroom lessons. A lot of that is we support what we're seeing in the building. We do monthly themes, like September was suicide prevention, October is bullying prevention, and in there just providing lessons. And then at the high school level, the 2 high school counselors push into the freshman foundation class, which I'll talk a little bit about further on in the presentation. We use Second Step. That's one of the programs that we use in the classroom. They have really great tools and opportunity for learners to engage in anything that we're doing. Like I said, the suicide prevention, the bullying prevention, transition into middle school, transition into high school. So it's something that's also utilized at the elementary level. So they have that nice K through 8 programming that they're used to and that they like to engage in. And then we have lots of partnerships. We talked a little bit about NAMI New Hampshire. David mentioned Youth Services in Keene that comes in and does some work with our learners, both in response to needs, but also proactive programming that we do. We work with Monadnock Center for Violence Prevention, Reality Check, River Center, and that takes on many forms. They may come in and partner in the classroom with us. They might be providing us with resources. They may host evening events for families or community members. So it can look very different, but they're great community partners, and we're always looking to build those partnerships. We talked a little bit about foundations. So we have a freshman foundation class, which all of our ninth graders take. They start with some goal setting. We talk about the transition from 8th to 9th grade, even though we're in the same building. There's a lot of things that shift and change between 8th and 9th grade. And so school counselors are pushing in. They go in every single Wednesday and they work with Dana Jackson, who's a teacher of the class. They work together on all the programming, what the course is going to look like. They do a lot of future planning. What are the things you're interested in? What are the things you're curious about? Where are your strengths and all of that? And they build plans throughout the school year that they reflect on and revisit in 10th and 11th grade. And then that leads to our capstone project. And really hoping that we can invite the community to join the capstone. So last year was our first opportunity. And the capstone is really kind of wrapping up your whole high school experience and taking what you've learned about yourself through the courses, through the experiences that you've had, and focusing on something that will help you continue to build your pathway after you graduate, no matter what you do after you leave us. And so those capstones can focus on a career and technical education class that a learner might be taking. Some of our learners are taking college classes, and that might be the focus of their capstone. Many of our learners are building their own programs and participating in extended learning opportunities, spending time in the little Orioles, or we have learners this year that are at our elementary schools working with other teachers. They're using their work experience to build their capstone. And they are doing weekly reflections, getting feedback, meeting with Dana Jackson and Gretchen Booth Tebow to reflect on that. And that all wraps up in this really nice presentation. And we held it last year in the library classroom. I think it's kind of small. I think we've outgrown that space already. And it was like a science fair setup where we just walked around and engaged in conversation. And they told us about all about their capstone, but also what they learned through that experience, what they learned while they were here in high school. And it was quite amazing, and other learners got to see it, and we're really hoping to open it up to community and parents and guardians this year. It was really, I think, more than I could expect. The learners were amazing. David mentioned a little bit about learner support, and SST stands for Student Support Team. We want to make sure that all of our learners have the support that they need to feel successful. And that means paying attention to what's happening for our learners. Are we having learners who maybe are missing a lot of school or coming to school late, or maybe their grades start to dip, or maybe we're seeing a rise in attendance? And we want to have conversations so that we can support learners. What might be going on? What can we do to help them feel more successful here? How can we help engage our parents and guardians in those conversations? So we do that at the learner support level. We do that with administrators in the school counseling team. And then every Wednesday, the school counseling team is available for drop-in. So any teacher can drop in and say, hey, I'm worried about a learner. I'm seeing something change in this learner. How can I support them? Do you know there's anything going on that I should be aware of, or that might help me better support them in the classroom? Or it can even be in the drop-in. Like sometimes maybe you're seeing a lot of behaviors in your classroom and you want some help. You want an observation or some different ways to manage what you're seeing in your classroom. And so teachers can just stop in and talk to one or the whole team. It really depends on what teachers and learners need. So always trying to build that kind of basket of resources and supports before things start to escalate, right? Like as you saw earlier, we're seeing a decline in the number of discipline referrals, the number of suspensions, and we want to continue to see those numbers go down. And this is one way for us to do some early intervention here at the school. And then we have mentoring. So mentoring is a 20-minute period of time. It happens after block 1 every day. And we have mentoring activities that learners participate in every Tuesday. So at the beginning of every month, I send out a list of 10 or 12 activities to the mentoring teachers, and they get those activities. And then they choose, and many of those mentor teachers put up all the activities for their learners to look at. And as a team, they decide what 2 or 3 activities over the month they're going to participate in. And these are an example. This month is bullying prevention, and it is also Red Ribbon Week. Well, next week is the week, but we kind of celebrate it as a month. And so these are just a sample of the activities that mentors and mentees could participate in this month. And so every Tuesday they do an activity, and then every Wednesday the students participate in a mentor reflection, so they can say, you know, did they like the activity? What would they recommend for improvement? What was the best part of it? So we take their feedback, like what's working, what's not working, more interactive activities, less interactive. And so we take that feedback, we share it at our staff meetings, we talk about it as an administrative team. And when I'm putting those together, I take that into consideration and try to provide a wide range of things for our learners to participate in. And some of the areas that we want to focus on is, I talked a little bit about the mentoring program, but also we don't want the mentoring program to be like a one and done. Like bullying prevention isn't just 3 activities in the month of October, right? So we're making sure that in our weekly connection, we're sharing information with our families and community. We're making sure that we're doing tabling in our cafeteria, and we're inviting in our community partners. And we are just trying to spend more time making sure that those tier 1, which are those universal programs that we want all of our learners to have, are happening multiple times throughout the month to reinforce or provide supports or information for our learners, and that we're also meeting the needs of a diverse group of learners. We're focused on attendance. So behind the screen, you may have seen our bulletin board, just really focused on why attendance here at Conant Middle High School is important and why coming to school is important. And then when you're not here, we miss you and we want you to come back and be in school with us and be engaging. So we're doing a little kind of competition between grades in September, 6th grade 1. So I don't know, you might want to get those juniors, Dante, on board to kind of race with the 6th graders. But even though 6th grade 1, we want to try to increase their attendance too. So learning a little bit about what's behind that. What are some of the reasons our learners aren't in school, and what might we do to encourage better attendance? Always looking to be in the classroom. So we do a really great job with regular classroom visits in grades 6 through 9. So our focus this year is to figure out more ways to push into classrooms for learners in grades 10 through 12. So that's a big focus for us this year. Talk a little bit about testing support. Is that, or do you want to? So I know that we spent some time looking at our test scores and identifying learners that could benefit from New Hampshire SAS and SAT, PSAT test prep and tutoring. So we identified those learners. I had the privilege of meeting with the high school learners to talk about ways that they could engage in the test prep portion of it, met individually with all those learners, emailed home, had an opportunity to set up schedules for them. Unfortunately, attendance wasn't where we would hope it would be, but we'll continue to reach out to those learners. So it's some way that the school counselors are still involved with that process too. And then I think I touched on this, always looking to provide a multi-tiered system of support. We want to make sure that there's programming for that all of our learners get. 100% of our learners get those tier 1 supports. And then learners who may need additional supports and programming besides the tier 1 receive that at the tier 2 and tier 3 level, which goes back to that learner support process that we're following and always looking to improve.
So before I jump into the continuing challenges piece, I just want to touch back on the mentoring for 1 second. One of my goals today have been to try to capture some pictures of the things that are produced through the mentoring activities. If you walked through our building, you would see trees outside of a lot of classrooms with leaves that have sort of strategies for managing daily stress. Or you might see there was one activity that was creating like a heart out of sticky notes, and each one had a nice message that people can grab if they're feeling a little bit down for the day. It's things like that, but all across the building, you know, you can see these outside of every single classroom, because the kids get into it and they really do take it seriously to the point that they not only are doing the mentoring activities, but they're doing them with care and they're doing them with attention. I walked by a group, I think it was the end of last week, that was making their tree, and they were really thoughtful about what the leaves said, and they didn't like a couple of them, so they took them down, we're redoing them, but they are having dialogue and conversations. And that's the big part about the mentoring activities, is that piece more than anything else. It's making sure that every kid understands that when we're talking about bullying prevention or stress management or how to handle the flow of a school day and not feel like you're getting burned out, that kids are internalizing and seeing that this is something that all of their peers are working on together, and that the strategies are not ones that they have to access on their own. And I think that that's had a huge impact the more that we've been successful at building that type of programming, and the more that kids have been able to give us feedback that has then turned around to make the programming more successful. So I didn't take pictures today because we have a no cell phone policy during the day, and I'm unwilling to set a bad example. So I actually do not take my cell phone out during the day, but that's okay. If you walk around anytime, you'll see the examples of that. And then I'll touch a little bit more on in the challenges section on the testing support. We included that on school culture and climate because that is an important part of growth for us, is considering how we can continue to reach kids in those areas. And it speaks to an ongoing challenge of getting that type of seriousness embedded in with the testing that our teachers see in their classrooms. So I'll talk about that in a little bit. One area that continues to elude us in terms of how to fill this gap is consistent parent-guardian support when it comes to some of these areas of difficulty. And I'm not saying that most of our parents are not always supportive, but I'm saying that it's a chunk. And that chunk can be very consuming of our time, but can also make it really difficult to institute the types of systems that can support improvements in some areas of our school. A great example is discipline. You know, when we have behavior challenges and we institute the discipline code or code of conduct, we, more than I would like, get a rejection of the school's authority to do that. And that can be really difficult. You know, if we're attempting to impose a graduated set of sanctions and a parent's response is, you're not keeping my kid after school, now we're automatically moving into, okay, well, we have to address it now during the school day, which means some sort of in-school suspension, right? And that creates a whole different basket of challenges. When parents in the school are not on the same page for the discipline of learner behavior at school, it undermines systems and makes it really hard to then gain the appropriate level of buy-in to improve some behavior. Unfortunately, we get a pretty consistent rejection of support offerings from baskets of different parent populations in our community. That's really difficult. You know, I get as many emails and concerns about having homework, for example, as I get about the thought that we don't have homework, which is not true. We have a late bus and we have a tutoring center that's open 4 days a week to help learners. Many parents will say, well, my kid's at school for 7.5 hours. If they need extra help, that's too bad. These are difficult pieces. How do you build a system to close gaps if we don't have parent buy-in to then have their kids get the types of support that might be helpful to them? Testing is a tough one, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. We have a large pocket of people who reject the importance of those tests, and they come from 2 different places. That's why it's hard to reach them. One place is, well, my kid is much more than a test, and I don't want them being kind of boiled down to a test number, so I don't support this. And the other is, well, I don't want my kid being, you know, kind of held responsible for this type of data point and figure something else out. So that's tough. And then we'll talk a little bit about the forums as well. We offer a lot of community events to try to help parents and guardians with some of these really tough areas of raising children nowadays. Screenagers is a great example to help with some of the technology pieces. We've had some substance nights to help parents kind of recognize challenges around substance abuse or what to look for. We offered a bullying and suicide prevention awareness for adults at the open house, and these have often no or very low attendance, which can be discouraging from community partners coming back. So these are some challenges, and this is a community effort that we have to figure out. You know, the school can only offer so much if we can't figure out a way to get some of these folks to the table with us. That becomes a really difficult piece. So just as an example, we talked a little bit about testing. We heard the message loud and clear that this is an important data point for pockets of society today in our community. That was a very loud conversation last year. We get it. So we went through the steps this summer. We spent money sending letters to all of the learners who scored at level 1 in either ELA or math on any of the state tests, kind of alerting parents or guardians that we're concerned and we're going to offer some additional support. We followed that up with individual meetings in the school year. We shifted around some after-school resources from clubs and activities to create this after-school tutoring center and have provided some tutoring resources. Counseling met individually, actually Kim met individually with 30 learners in grades 10 and 11 and arranged time for them to come either during a junior block or after school. Only 6 of those individuals have come so far. And that's despite kind of assurance that they would be there or seeming support from home. With the middle school, we've created, again, SAS tutoring options. We're using a tool called Lumos, which is specifically designed to help with SAS. We've called, had letters sent home and or met with 38 7th and 8th graders based on the spring's results. And so far, we've had 2 individuals come to the sessions that we're offering and trying to set up for them. That's really hard. When we're putting programming in place and we can't pull them from core programming during the day because that would cause them to fall behind in the actual academics, it's hard to then gain any sort of traction when the response that we often get is no, we don't think that's important. We also, just as another example, a school day example, tomorrow is our fall testing day with PSAT and SAS interim assessments. And we typically use the afternoon either for makeup for missing work, reassessment if there's classroom pieces. And this year I gave Kim the undesirable task of going through any kid who had any ones anywhere in SAS or SAT and automatically checking that we'd like them to stay tomorrow for some extra SAS or SAT practice. Most of those parents have dismissed their children from that tomorrow, which is during the school day, stating things like, you're not going to punish my child for a single test score. So this is really hard, and I don't know what the answer is, but this is a barrier. And we're stating here's additional resource, and I heard at the last board meeting I attended that we could be doing more. We're trying to find ways to do more. I don't know how to overcome that resistance, absent creating some sort of a mandatory class, which is challenging in other ways. So that's a tricky piece of our school culture that I'm not sure how to bridge that gap with some pockets. Most of our parents are very supportive and very great, and we appreciate all of our families, but this is a pocket that I just don't know how to reach right. This is the open house, great attendance this year, by far the most we've ever had. We counted 497 people who crossed through the doors here and signed in. It was kind of crazy. I didn't get to leave the sign-in table until 6:30, which is an hour into open house. I've never had that happen. That was amazing. And again, it speaks to what we've seen with a lot of these kind of fun things that we do with families. We do get very good attendance at those. But again, the forum that was provided during open house, our counseling team put together and had nobody go in there. So that was tough. And then another area of challenge we're having is the staffing levels, which Ruben kind of talked about a little bit earlier. Obviously, we had to make choices this year, and that's understandable, but creates a very difficult climate for staff and how they can support each other and work with kids. The middle school currently has absolutely no flexibility in schedules. This is resulting in some really large classes, in some cases 28 to 29, 30 kids, but within those very large class groupings, one example, we have a teacher who has 12 or 13 identified students, and there's no place to kind of break that up or provide additional opportunities for that group. If we have behavioral challenges, there's a group that is a known kind of not really great together group that we always would try to break up, but they're traveling in a pack this year because there's just nowhere to put them, and it's burning our teachers out, and we don't know how to support them. Our academic labs this year, we had to shift around some staffing because of student service needs. So we lost a middle school special educator. And in addition to that, lost that poor teacher and the STEM teacher. So the schedules have become so tight that there was literally no place to put academic labs. If we had planned for that, that would be okay because you might be able to develop a really effective co-teaching model, but that's not really where we're at right now. So again, we're pulling a lot of different levers to try to make sure that learners with special education needs are getting what they need, and our teachers are doing it, but at great cost. And it's not a sustainable model. It is creating a really difficult scenario in the middle school. And again, UA periods, there's just not options for them. And music's a great example. At both the middle and high school, we went from 2 music teachers to 1. Her classes have been hard to fill in some cases because there is just no place to put some of these options so that they fit with all the core classes with the fewer teachers there as well. So we're kind of at a nightmare scenario in the middle school. It's really tough. And I don't know how it would sustain without making some choices about what's important and not going into next year. And I would say the high school has had different types of needs. And this has been a longer conversation about the high school. This year, we were not able to host any summer programming, which was very difficult. That's typically when we've had anywhere from 30 to 40 credits recovered by high school learners, mostly because they were missing 1 learning goal or 2 learning goals, and it was relatively short-lived to get them over the finish line, but we had no summer school this year. So this has resulted in 2 scenarios, me trying to find tutors to do this during the school year, which is really hard, but mostly we've had kids repeating classes that they were very close to passing, and we don't lower our expectations. That's not the type of school we are. But without another option, that means that we have kids repeating a class because of 1 or 2 learning goals. That is a tough climate hit based on some of these staffing issues. Again, some UA flexibility challenges as we've lost those staffing pieces. And this is particularly true. We have UA teachers shared with the middle school. And again, this goes to the support offering for SAT. It'd be great to have a school day mandatory SAT prep class. Even if I had the buy-in to do that, I don't have the staff to do that. And I'm not sure what that would even look like. So that's another piece in the high school that is a hard climate hit right now. And this is just some food for thought. This is from the state's website. This is the 2023 to 2024 school year and budget year. So this is not last year's numbers and certainly not this year, which I can't even imagine. But even as far as 2 years ago back, you can see that on the middle school side, the middle school's average across New Hampshire per pupil cost was $21,545. Our middle school was $20,305. So that was about $1,240 less than average, which is a total based on that year student population of $297,600, less than the average that our middle school was funded. But you can see the high school is a much more significant concern even 2 years ago. The high school 2 years ago, that's the yellow dot, that's drifting below the range of the other two. Our high school into the 24 school year was funded at $18,336 per pupil. The state average for high schools was $21,545 per pupil that year. That's a difference of $3,209 per pupil, or over $1 million. If you add up, multiply that by the student population at the high school that year. That's a significant difference, and that's just from the midline average. That is not making us the Taj Mahal, for example. So I point this out only because last year, we already know that we were 68 out of 72 for funding at the high school level. And after the cuts this year, we will, I'm sure, be that 72 out of 72 figure. That's hard. That's creating issues every single year that compounds. I mean, if we had been at the average, that would have been 10 additional teaching positions at the high school and 3 at the middle school. That's a lot of personnel difference. Even getting us halfway to the average would have been 5 and 2. So without those resources, we've made significant growth. And I just want to remind the community and the board that we continue to have needs at both grade spans that a reduced budget does not serve, as the state average is continuing to increase. And you can see ours is on a downward trend. So, and this is not because we have less kids. This is a per pupil average cost, which means that as our kids decline, if the per pupil is declining, that means our funding is declining as well. So this is a tough area to be in, and it's something to consider as we think about next year. I think the middle school is in absolute dire straits. We're holding the culture together and continuing to grow with learning. I worry if we don't do something to at least bring back some core support for the middle school. And the high school has done, I mean, School of Excellence with the funding we had is incredible and a testament to the staff we have, but not sustainable if we don't do something or think about the type of school we want to create with this level of funding going forward. And I'll try to end on a quick summary because that was a lot of information. So this is my executive summary of entering year number 6 as the principal here. We have made a lot of progress in a lot of areas as a school. Academically, you saw from both the graduation rate and the increase in college attendance and post-secondary attendance, the decline in significant behaviors, the decrease in the kids needing suspension, the leadership elements that have continued to grow. We have created sustainable programs in a lot of parts of our school. Our behaviors are getting better. I promise I didn't plan that with Dante to talk about the increased engagement. He's absolutely spot on. That is true. Learners love their school. Not everyone every day, but increasingly learners are finding something here that connects them to their community. Learners are graduating and finding increasing success in college every year that we continue to have these systems in place. And we have also met many of our programming goals. We had back in, I think it was 21, we set 5-year goals across the district, and we were revisiting those recently. And most of the ones pertaining to our schools have been checked off as being either completed or in progress, which is really great. That's what should be happening. And that's something that we're really proud of. We still are not quite reaching all pockets of parents and guardians in our community, and that's a challenge. Parents and guardians have the most important role in how their kids view school, far more important than anything that I can do or that an individual teacher can do in almost every circumstance. And what we find is when we have consistent parent guardian support, those 2 kids who are showing up from the middle school or the 8 kids showing up from the high school for testing, for example, those learners are going to grow, and those are where we find successes. But education is an equal partnership in the sense that if the school and parents don't find avenues to be on the same page, it undermines every system for that individual learner or group of learners. I think staffing is an increasing difficulty, and this is a year that I think decisions have to get made about what the school is going to look like here. We're at a turning point where either we let things go or we find ways to hold them together and hopefully sustain them more effectively going forward. But I think that I feel that I'm at the extent of what I can hold together with what we have, and I know our staff is certainly feeling like they're at their breaking point in a lot of ways. And at the time I've been the principal, I have not heard that conversation as much as I have this year. And I think in particular, the middle school is just not sustainable how it is now. So either we need to pull back on some of our academic programming, which would be a shame because I think we're making significant growth with Wisdom as a 90-minute program and with consistent math and RTI related to math. But with our staffing levels, those things, as well as the new state requirement for computer science at the middle level, which I don't think we're going to be as well equipped to handle as we think we might be, as well as some of the changes with Ed 306 at the high school, I just don't think that that's sustainable. So that's it. That's my presentation.
Wow.
Yeah. Board, all right, board comment, board questions, John.
Yes, David, this last thing that you touched on, and first of all, thank you for all that you presented, you and Kim both. But we have been worrying, I think, I'd say collectively about the very thing you mentioned, that staff might be at the breaking point. We know that the loss of staffing and the spreading of responsibilities to other people who try and plug the gaps, that's got to be wearing. One of the things that we struggle with is how to communicate this to our partners in the community. And by our partners, I mean, some of our businesses that really depend on good schools to attract workers and to attract people who come into town and buy homes. They've got to be concerned about this, but they don't seem to be aware. I'd say the same thing about our town leaders, our selectmen and other members of our community who, have their own challenges to deal with. But I wonder, how can we communicate to them that we're in a very fortunate moment, but that we're reaching a breaking point?
I think starting with exactly what you just said, that we've been very fortunate to have the staff that we have. We have amazing teachers. We have caring paraeducators. I mean, every person who comes into our schools cares deeply about learners. And we're fortunate because they want to be a part of the work that's been happening in our district. And I think that's true across all three of our schools. But that desire and that kind of groundedness only can carry somebody so far. And I think we are at that place where we've been fortunate, and we won't continue to be if we don't find a way to give some support to the people who come in and take care of our children and teach them and prepare them for the future. I think that message has to be consistent and not confused with things like a one-off, SAT or SAS data point that gets far more attention than it probably should. I think if you talk to our learners and you watch them in classroom and you see them presenting and you hear them speak and you look at the projects they're producing and what they do in the community, that if people could see that more and move past, obsessing over a single point in the year, we might have some success with community members understanding what they have here in their schools. I don't know how to help them otherwise. I also don't know if people want to know that stuff about our schools. I can't even tell you how dismayed I was to hear somebody lying about the children in our community and their teachers and saying kids can't read because their SAT score was less than 50%. They don't even know what that score means when they say things like that. So I don't know how to help those individuals except to phrase it as bluntly as you just said. We are very fortunate, and we're nearing the end of that good fortune if we don't do something to help kind of plug those needs and make sure our staff have what they need. I mean, even something as seemingly minor as like a substitute, situation that we're dealing with right now is becoming so much of a strain on our staff because they already are feeling strained. And I'll give you an example. Today we had no substitutes in our building for per diem subs, which is pretty common, but people were out sick. So teachers are stepping in and covering. They're giving up their preparation periods. They're still trying to find ways to get their own work done. And people are leaving sick during the day. So now we're making more phone calls to get people to come out. There are some days that we have 8 to 10 people out with 1 or 2 subs, and it's teachers filling that gap. That seemingly small burden on them, is exponentially harder when they're already dealing with some of these other challenges I mentioned about having inflexibility with learner needs and schedules, or having these super large classes that they're not really sure how to support without increased resources for themselves. So I think the message needs to be just as blunt as you said, John. We are very fortunate that we have had great staff, great teachers, great support staff, and we are at the point where they're starting to feel like this may not have the future that they're looking for if they don't start getting a little more support. And not support from their administration, support from their communities, speaking about the things that they value about their schools. Because I think another thing I would say, and another mistruth, is that our staff don't feel supported by their administrators. That is not true. Right now, what they don't feel supported by is their communities. And that's a really sad, different place from what I'm used to in the time, the 16 years that I've been here. I have not seen that be the vibe that staff are feeling, but they're feeling it right now more than ever.
Anything else?
And I think it's a testament to them that our kids don't feel that as much as they could. I mean, it's remarkable to me that that our student representative is echoing what I said about kids being proud of their schools and having more spirit than they usually do in the year that we've had this huge blow to what the schools are able to have for support and offer. And that's because of our staff, making sure that they still provide our kids what they need and more.
Thank you, Tom.
I was thrilled to be here in open house. It was one of those, however many parents you said were here, people were here. It was 497. John was here too. School looks amazing. We've been so tight with our money, and yet you walk through and things are painted, the artwork on display here and in the painted lockers. I mean, it was beautiful, and the teachers were so engaged, waiting in line to speak to a teacher for a few minutes. It was really remarkable. I felt a great deal of pride in our school, and you see, parents looked happy, kids looked happy. It was beautiful. I would like to encourage us to start actually inviting some of our community leaders and our selectmen to things like open houses and to graduation or awards night. I mean, our awards night last year was amazing. So many kids got awards, and it wasn't the usual 2 kids. It was a very diverse group of kids who got scholarships and awards. And I don't know if any of the selectmen or community leaders would show up, but I think being invited, it would put that on their radar.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
We are doing good things, and I understand that the teachers and the administrators are maxed out. We need to help.
And I wish there was a way to help people to understand the kids that they also are fortunate to have here. There's people who have come here from other schools and taken jobs, and they stay, and they say, I just had an incident today that occurred, and I went to see the teacher to say, oh, I'm so sorry that behavior happened. It was a behavior situation that's not normal for us. And that teacher said to me, first of all, you coming and checking is great, but the sad thing is, this happened all the time at my other school. It doesn't happen here, and because we care so much about our kids, and our kids come along with these really great value systems. This is what we hear from any person who comes from the outside into our schools. Oh my gosh, your kids, they're eager to learn, they're kind, they're respectful, they make mistakes, but not big mistakes. And when they do, they learn. We're fortunate in that way too. And the kids in these communities deserve a bigger conversation around, well, where they're coming from and where they're going, and what they can get while they're here to make them stay here. And I think that's the sad part about this dialogue too, is when kids don't see their schools as a center focus of the community, they move on. They find an opportunity elsewhere and they don't come back. And when I first started teaching here, we had a lot of kids who went off to college far away, and I don't see any of them around here, hardly ever. And good for them that they found a life's journey, but sad for us, because these were talented, smart kids who should have been obvious, individuals to remain here. And I think that we lose something really dear to these communities that should be dear to them. If they don't feel like the community has their back at this young age, they don't come back and have the communities back when they get older. They go and move on to someplace else. And I think that's a big challenge that the leaders in these towns, it's not my place. I'm not a town select person, but I think that's something that's missing in the conversation is what it's going to take to help keep more of these graduates here, building businesses, running for town council or select boards, helping to grow business or build new downtown infrastructure, whatever it might be. We're missing something with that. And I think that stems back to this conversation about who supports the schools and for what purpose and who doesn't and for what purpose. So that's just my 2 cents in the last decade and a half that I've been here and have been observing.
Thank you so much, David. I do want to remind people, as you talked about the scores and the testing and the number of that 38 students that were either low or dismissed, that those low scores do count toward the total, which
Right.
brings, like, it's not that if you don't take the test, then you're not counted. No, those are counted as zeros. So every low score brings the whole down. And so that is a real crisis that so many families are simply for multiple reasons, saying that this isn't what we want to participate in, which I get it. I'm frustrated with the testing, and I actually, while we were looking at the perch on slide 8, when we saw the perch and the numbers of the data of who's in it, I looked up when the SAS test is, and I was, oh yes, it was right there. And in that April-May timeframe, like, oh yeah, that was SAS testing. Yeah, I've watched kids go through testing and then, oh yeah, I can see where that's a stressful time. But these are what count right now, as part of the whole. And thank you for bringing that whole to us. Chris, you had some?
Yeah, just to hit on a few things, and maybe this is getting a little bit ahead, but I think David kind of touched on it. I know we're going to talk about our priorities for the budget season, and I think number one I have here on my list was prepared to say is like taking care of our people, right? Our teachers, administrators, I think, are what we know makes this school thrive. And one of my goals is to, what I think we should do is show them that they are valued with the decisions that we're able to make in these upcoming weeks. I think I was surprised, but maybe shocked that we had as much staff and administrative retention as we did this year. I think it says a lot about the commitment to the school and the kids. Certainly there are other opportunities out there. My guess would be that if we have the same thing happen again, that's not going to be the case. And I think David is kind of hinting at what that situation is like. So I think that's something that we need to keep top of mind, is being sure that in all our conversations, we're going to have tough decisions, right, to make. But I think in all the conversations, we need to take care to show our staff that they're valued. Very important for me. Just to hit on quickly, I know I talked probably too much, but I appreciate the transparency in this. I think that very few other schools probably have this level of transparency on the data, right? Good and bad. I think one of the things that I appreciate is like we do acknowledge that we have a problem with bullying or something like that, and we do something about it. I look at some of the state data and I see lists of like high schools that, haven't had a bullying incident in 4 years, which is I'll say the nice word, not true, right? So I think I appreciate the fact that there are some tough truths that have to be, but in order to move forward as a school, you need to recognize that stuff. And I will say, like, on the community piece of it and the knowing of kids, I'm fortunate enough to know a ton of kids in these schools, right? And I will say that they don't feel so. There is that piece of this budget thing affected them. They don't feel supported. I hear the comments, right? They don't know. They don't know and they don't care that I'm on the school board and I'm involved, one or the other. In, multiple times a week, I hear stuff about, we can't afford that. It's, it's not the budget, they don't care, the budget thing. It gets said. And that's just the reality. It's not prompted by anything. I think that they feel that. We go to other schools that are nicer. Oh, this is, the school with money, where you hear that and it hurts and it shouldn't be that way. That's the reality. But I will say that, you know, lucky enough knowing these kids, I could handpick 10 kids that if people are, you know, more than that, right? But people would just be blown away if they knew these kids, what they accomplished, I guess, across the whole spectrum, you know, arts, athletics. We have so many great kids. And I think a lot of people that we're trying to reach don't know these kids, right? If I were to have a conversation like, well, how many kids do you know that attend our schools? I think in some cases, you know, for a large portion of our community, that would be, you know, very few, if any. And I think it's hard to make a decision based on that. It's easy for me to make a decision. I know so many kids. You know, not everyone is as fortunate as that. Yeah, I think that's probably it for now. And I guess on the parent accountability issue, it's something that I understand and believe. I think when I ran for school board, kind of part of my goals was like, hey, let's connect with parents. I don't know how to connect with those parents. I'd be happy to, like, you know, continue to talk about brainstorming ways to do it. I think is an important piece of it. I think when you hear the word accountability, I've always, you know, accountability is on both sides. Parents need to be held accountable as much as the schools for the performance. I firmly believe that. I think some people don't. You know, the accountability, I think, is too heavily swayed towards the school when it really, in my mind, should be at the very least a 50-50 mix. I'd even argue that it's more on the parents. In any case, I don't know how to fix that. And I guess I will point out that that's also, I think, a uniquely public school challenge versus some of the things that we're put up against, right? Oh, you're not performing like this school or this school. Well, if you had that sort of like parent rejection and non-participation at some of these other schools, you'd be gone. And then they'd be here. And maybe that's happened in some cases. I don't know. But I think that that's something that's okay. And I appreciate the continued efforts to work on these things. I know it's probably a ton of work to put together tutoring sessions for 40 people and then have 2 people show up. And I admire the fact that you keep doing it. And I think that's, you know, what we should keep doing as we work on the problem. It's about problem solving.
It's this very interesting dynamic in New Hampshire right now with the parent-school connections. You know, there's laws that say parents have rights, absolutely. You know, parents are central to their kids' education, absolutely. But then there's also laws that say if there's any kind of conflict, parents have the right to, for example, just pull their child out of school for a window of time and put them back. And in that time that they're not in school, there's no accountability to what type of learning is or isn't happening. So sometimes it's even a situation where we engage a family about a problematic, challenging behavior or a significant area of concern or a need, and that learner is suddenly not in school anymore and they've been pulled to homeschool, and 2 months later they come back. And then we kind of rinse and repeat the cycle again, right? And it just keeps happening. And those individuals end up in our testing data as well, right? There's no balance in that dynamic. There's a ton of responsibility put on schools, but laws that undermine the school's ability to actually do those responsibilities. And that's a tricky dynamic in the state right now, which I don't have a good answer for how you fix that. And I think the other piece is, this is anecdotal, but used to be back in the day, you know, we hear this sometimes when a parent would get a call, their first reaction to their child would be, what did you do? More often than not now, the question is, what did the teacher do? And that's often what those families will then bring back to me. Well, my child is saying this, this, and this that the teacher did. And it's like, but your child is a teenager. And teenagers are hardwired in many cases to self-protect. That's what they're learning how to do. And we're supposed to kind of look through that screen and understand that we're dealing with adults who are entrusted with the care of our children. They're not telling lies, you know, towards your child. But that is unfortunately where a lot of parents go right away is, you know, your teacher's not telling the truth and I want you to do something about it. It's like, you know, my teachers care about children. They're not trying to hurt them. So again, I'm with you, Chris. I don't know what the answer to that is, but it's a very, very tricky dynamic to navigate. Because again, if we push too hard, then that child's often will go to homeschool and we don't see them for a few months. And then, you know, we're trying to pick up the pieces when they come back. So it's tough. Not something that comes through in SAT or SAS data in any clear way, except that all of a sudden that's a level 1 that we can't say anything about, right? It's tough.
Thank you so much for you.
Thank you for the time.
Incredibly appreciate